A woman's journey may not exactly be an easy task, but in her new book, Mother Tongue, The Surprising History of Women's Words, Jenni Nuttall attempts to do just that. Her research shows how the evolution of words has impacted the taboo in womanhood and oftentimes stigmatizes the way the world talks about females. Jenni, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me on.
So let's start with your research that sought out the origin of the word woman. What language experts thought it was and what it actually is?
The difficulty is where does that word weef, that's standing for woman and then later on wife, comes from? Scholarship isn't quite sure about that. It might be something to do with weaving, one of the occupations traditionally associated with women, or to do with waving. People have suggested the idea of women kind of being busy backwards and forwards, or they're kind of waving hips, but no one's really sure. So there's a bit, the further back you go, there's more of a mystery.
You write, our vocabulary today still bears the consequences of this general shushing of women and their words. During your research, what other historical writings showed evidence of sexism?
Oh, I mean, an awful lot. You know, the way in which some of the writings of the church constructs women, and particularly medical writing in the words for parts of female anatomy, and the way in which women's sort of work was valued and shaped. You can think of even words like bachelor and spinster for single men, single women, bachelor, a young knight or a young student, so our Bachelor of Arts, or even a kind of young apprentice, showing in kind of men on their making their way in the world. Spinster, coming from that job title of a woman spinning wool, because that was often the kind of low-paid, low-status work that single women were left to do at the edges of the economy, and gradually that word becomes a kind of standard legal term for a single woman. So you can see marked on all sorts of vocabulary the kind of traces of historical sexism and misogyny.
You're a mother and also were a tutor at the University of Oxford. How has your research been influenced by your daughter and your students?
Well, my students are great, and they often kind of stop me when we're talking about a poem or a play or you know, story, and we'll just stop and ask about a word. And lots of the book comes from kind of finding out the answers. But I've also, in my home life, been working out what are the best sorts of words to talk to my daughter about, you know, what it's like to grow up, female ages and stages and kind of changes in bodies. And one of the kind of sparks for the book was her coming home from school after a kind of tricky day and saying, period, that word we use for menstruation. She said, period is such a boring word. And she meant something like, it doesn't really capture what I'm kind of dealing with on a kind of physical, social level. And it's been a great way to bring my kind of home world and my working world together, this book.
You write, some of our first steps toward equality were taken by means of these radicals' encouragement to live not as everlasting children, but once we come of age as grown women. Can you explain how this imagery and how the language of what a grown woman is supposed to be has influenced the way girls ultimately grow up?
Even as you go back into the history of familiar words like girl, that word comes quite late in the history of English, and it comes in when it's first used just to talk about female children and young women. It's used often to label girls and young women who are kind of stepping outside of roles like kind of maiden or daughter or any of these kind of socially allocated roles. So even girl has a way in which it's, you know, we might think of that. Sometimes it's used today as girlish, you know, a slightly kind of belittling way of saying it. But girl in its history, right at the beginning, was often used to signify girls who were kind of pushing at the boundaries of what was allowed. So I thought there were all of these stories, if you followed all of our everyday words right back to their beginnings, you could kind of find some of those tensions between what society is trying to kind of limit women and girls to, and what women and girls might want.
Really fascinating stuff. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate the conversation. I want to let our viewers know you can purchase Mother Tongue, The Surprising History of Women's Words, wherever books are sold.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.